Welcome to the podcast for real life heroines. I'm your host, Susanna Liller. In each episode, I talk with women who dare to be themselves, real heroines who take risks, both big and small. They try new things, challenge themselves, and take leaps into the unknown. Together, we'll hear stories of women stepping into courage, finding and using their voice, and realizing the gifts they were born to give. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us today on the podcast for Real Life Heroines. And I'm very pleased to introduce to you my guest, Holly Reid. Holly, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Should I say Pastor Holly Reid?
No, just call me Holly.
Just call you Holly. But everyone should know, and I will now tell them, Holly, that you are a minister, a United Church of Christ ordained minister and pastor at a place called The Neighborhood in Bath, Maine since 2019.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 years. And you're also a registered nurse, and you have practiced in that profession, the nursing profession, since 1987.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, let me finish explaining. In 2014, you decided to explore a second career. Yeah, and I have these questions, I'm holding them back. And attended the seminary at the Union Theological Seminary in New York City, graduating with a master's in divinity in pastoral care in 2016.
Correct. Yeah.
And you also hold an MSN, so that's a master's in nursing, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
In community health nursing from the University of Nevada in Reno.
Yes.
So at the neighborhood, and I will tell people very proudly that the neighborhood in Bath, Maine is my parish, my place where I get my spiritual juice. You are very passionate when in that place because you love creating community, which you do so well, and you engage in meaningful worship, which, wow, those are two words that have so much that can be discussed these days, and I will say it's meaningful worship to me. When you are not at the neighborhood, you are spending time with your partner, Jim, and your dog, Bernie, and cooking good food and riding on your bicycle.
Yeah.
Did I get the salient points?
You did indeed. Thank you. Yes.
So I'm gonna be asking you heroine's journey type questions, but reading this, it just prompted me. So how, if you don't mind my asking, how old were you when you decided, I know I'm a nurse, but I've got this call for a second career to go to the seminary in New York? How old?
Yeah. So I think when I got the call would have been around 2000, and I didn't 2002-ish. And I didn't go to seminary until 2014. So I was 49 years old, I guess, in 2014.
Okay.
So yeah, so around, I can't do that backwards math very fast, but
That's okay.
38 or 40 years old, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I asked that because getting a call and then following it, many people say, I'm too old, I can't change my career now, all that kind of stuff. So you were in your 40s, late 40s, right? And yeah, you did it. So, but I want to go back and I want to remind people. So we're talking about a heroine's journey that you have been on, and I want to explain what that is to people. But I also want to say we go on many in our lives.
Mm.
It's every time we answer a call, and most often it's about stepping into something very new and different, and that's jumping over the threshold. So we are going to, let me check in with you. We're going to talk about the one of you deciding to go to be a minister, right?
Yeah, yes.
And though I know within that there are some interesting stories, um, like being on a trapeze, but we'll see what we can get to. Um, so, Heroine's journey for any woman who hears what we say is a call. Now, it's not necessarily heard by your ears, but inside of you, it's, oh, I might want to do that. I might want to make a change. And, it can continue. When you said it started at 2002-ish, they kind of come at you and they can get louder and louder. And sometimes they're not from within you, it's about something that happens to you and that you have to react to.
Mhm.
We always have the choice how we're going to react. But at any rate, there's a call. The heroine responds to that call, taking her over what we call the threshold into a new situation, the journey of adventure, into the mystery, into the unknown. Good things happen, bad things happen on that road. You meet allies. Sometimes they're devious characters who don't help you, but it's all about giving you challenges which make you grow. The whole journey evolves you sort of to the next level of your who you are. And then you come back to your community, though you probably never really left, but in your case, you really did. You went to New York and you share what you've learned. Heroine, and this is what heroines do. And so I'm gonna ask you questions that kind of take us through that storyline.
Sure.
Okay. So how did the call come to you? Did it come as a bang out of the sky or something that just was noodling around?
Yeah. So I appreciate that you describe call in all of those different ways because I know that some people feel call like it's coming from something inside of me, like I just got to do it. And some people feel a call from outside. And so my call, I guess maybe because of my faith background and ongoing faith journey, I consider it, I call it a call from God, uh, even though I know there are other words that people use for the call. And I was working full time in Truckee, California, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I was working full time in Reno, but living in Truckee, and I was attending a church there called Church of the Mountains. I was a Methodist church, just a really beautiful church, and I was working full time as a nurse, as I said. And I had this little like a drip feeling, like Holly, I want you to do more faith service for me. Holly, I want you to do more faith service. And it was like a tap, 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 but it would like never stop. And so one day, as I was considering, I started thinking about it, like, could I do more faith service? What would that look like? And every way that I looked at how I could do more faith service, it all seemed like a dead end. I was just like, there's no way for me to do more than the volunteer work that I'm already doing at my local faith community. And so one day I was having that tap, 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 and it was really bothering me. And so I remember being in my car and having this conversation out loud with God. And I said, God, I know that you're calling me to full time ministry. I said, but it's just not possible because I have a house payment, I have a mortgage, and I have a car payment. And so I have to work. And there's no way that I can put everything on hold and just go to seminary. That's like just not financially possible. And I remember also getting really angry because I knew what the call was and I knew I couldn't do it. And I was really frustrated of the tapping that wouldn't stop. And so I said, so God, this is how it is. When there's no mortgage, when there's no car payment, then yes, I most certainly will go into full time ministry. But for now, you just have to be happy with part-time Holly at the local church and leave me alone. I'm tired of like this call that won't stop, right?
Yeah, so you bargained, kind of put a
Yeah,
bargain. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so that was around 2002. And after I had that conversation, the tapping kind of died way down. I wouldn't say that it went away, but it wasn't so insistent. And then I got remarried to my partner, Jim. And that was in 2004. And then in 2007, we decided to move back to Maine to be near my parents who were elderly so that we could journey with them as they went into their elder years. And it just happened. I didn't plan it, but in 2007 happened to be the height of the what we now know as the housing bubble, but we didn't know it was a housing bubble then. And I sold my house in California at the top of the housing market. And I landed in Bodenham with no mortgage, with no car payment,
Wow.
no debt, right? So I didn't even think anything of it. I mean, I was like, yeah, well, that's great, right? I mean, I was thrilled. And I took a full-time job as a home health nurse in Brunswick, Maine. And I was driving around one day and doing my home health job. And all of a sudden, this little voice said, Holly, you don't have any mortgage. Holly, you don't have a car payment. Holly, you don't have any debt.
Mm.
And I remember that moment just being totally stunned. Like, wow. Like, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
that
Okay.
is a wow. Yes.
I'll do
Yeah.
it. Okay. And so, like, that was kind of my, I don't even know that there was a leap yet. I mean, the leap came
No, not
later. Yeah.
right. So before we go there, I just want to affirm that there are different theories about where calls come from. Some people say from your subconscious, all kinds of explanations of where they come from God being one. And I also subscribe to the from God um, theory. And it's interesting because also what happens at these moments when well, so you haven't really committed at this point in your story, have you? So how did that happen? Because what I remember, Holly, is you were part of the congregation when there was another minister in our church. And um, yeah, so I don't remember you talking about it. So how did that happen that you said, okay, I'm going to do this, which would be the leap across the threshold? Yeah.
Right. At first, because I don't view myself as a very like courageous or risk-taking person. So I was just going to do a little leap. I was going to go to school part-time at Bangor Theological Seminary that was open in Maine and work part-time at my nursing career. And so I had entered into pastoral conversations with Bill Bliss, who was my pastor. And yeah, I had made that decision. But then that school closed. I had just started and that
Right,
school
right.
closed. And so I was like, okay, now this is more difficult because there's not a place for me to go in Maine. So now how am I gonna make it work? And and so I knew I was going to do it. I think I even felt like I had to do it. I felt like that there wasn't like a choice since I had said those words out loud, and then since that request had been granted, I I had a sense of like there's no choice any longer. Like you have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided to go to seminary full time to quit my nursing job and to spend some of my retirement so that I could do it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And in a place, New York City, and my
Right.
understanding is that the seminary that you went to, Union Theologicals, isn't it in Washington Square, right in the center of the
It's
city?
right in Manhattan.
Okay,
It's like 121st in Broadway.
right,
Right.
right.
So it's on the Upper West Side. Yeah.
And I wonder because the other thing that happens on the journey, and also particularly around when you make the leap, okay, I'm doing this, I have to find a way, I can't do it in the safer way in Maine, I'm going to the big city. Something happens, and we call them in the journey threshold guardians, and they come forward because they want to keep you back. They want to keep you in your comfort zone. They want to keep you playing small. And they say things like, well, this will never work, or you're probably going to end up flunking because it's a lot harder. And who do you think you are? And you're probably not smart enough. Or did those voices appear, or any voice that sort of was trying to keep you back?
Right. I think the hardest thing was, you know, so I was always raised to be very fiscally careful. And so, like, to take money that was in a 401k for retirement, even to me, felt a little foolish. So I had that story in my head. And my father, who was always an outspoken person, didn't have any problems telling me that he outright thought it was foolish.
Yeah.
Like, your life and it's your money, honey, and you do what you want, but I don't know why you would spend it this way.
Right. That's a
Right.
threshold guardian for sure. Voice. Yeah. And they're just loving us and, trying to, again, as I said, keep us safe, right?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure that that was his concern too. Like, what are you going to do in retirement if you've spent this money now?
Right.
So those were the biggest obstacles. I was very fortunate because my husband was up for the adventure. He was a little bit nervous because we were going to live at the seminary, and he's a religious person, and so he did have some concerns about living at a seminary, but he was up for the adventure of it. And then, of course, I was very lucky. I had a very supportive faith community who, was just like, oh yeah, you got to go do this. Absolutely. So I had a lot of positive support, but financial barriers and financial concerns are not insignificant. I mean, those can just stop you.
Right. Right. But boy, did you find a way around them? I mean, just with your bargain, which really worked out. But so then, we say on the journey, good things happen and bad things happen, and there are allies who come forward and help you, and there are challenges.
Mhm.
And I guess what I'd like you to share, if you could, you were supposed to do a project, and you chose a particularly, I would say, challenging one for anybody on their journey. Can you share what that challenge was?
Well, I'm not sure if I know what you're talking about.
I'm
Yes.
talking about going to the prison.
Oh, going to the prison. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
To me, that would be very challenging.
yeah. So I didn't go to seminary thinking that I would go to work with people who experienced incarceration.
Right.
I thought because I was a nurse, I thought probably I would do something like be a hospice chaplain. I had really ruled out being a pastor. I was like, no, that's not a job for me at all, for sure. Which, so that's kind of funny. That's where I am. I'm a pastor. But in fact, I only took I took a couple of extra preaching classes in seminary because I felt like it was my area of biggest growth. Because I was like, well, just in case I end up in that role. But working with the people who are incarcerated, I had planned to do what it's called a CPE class, and it escapes me in the moment what CPE stands for, but it will come to me.
Yeah.
But I had planned to do an intensive class, an intensive educational class, and at Belmont Hospital in New York City, and I missed the deadline, and so I ended up getting into a CPE class for people who want to be a chaplain in the prison. And mostly I was only in that class because there weren't any other opportunities. And I really wanted to get the CPE education underneath my belt, clinical pastoral education,
There you
CPE.
go. It came to you.
Yeah. And so that was my first journey. And I went 3 days a week all summer long up to a prison in just outside of New York City, just north of New York City. And I met with these women 3 days a week, and it was just really a transformative moment for me to meet these women, to see the human side of them, to know them beyond the reason why they ended up incarcerated. It just changed me in every way. And probably the most profound way it changed me is I realized that if I had had any one of their circumstances, it could have been me. Like it could have been me that ended up in prison. If I had had what their lives were.
Right.
And I just really left with a profound sense that I was lucky, fortunate, privileged, that that wasn't how my life was. I was born into a different set of circumstances. So that changed me a lot. And then later on, I was going to be, I was looking to do our internship. We're supposed to do an internship in seminary. It's kind of like being a pastoral student, and the place that I wanted to go already had an intern. And so I went to my counselor and I said, so this is where I wanted to go, but they don't need one. What's left? What can I do? And she said, well, what have you been doing? And I said, well, I did this, CPE class in the prison. And she's like, oh, well, I have a church for you. And it was this church in Brooklyn, and it was founded by and for people who experienced incarceration.
Mm.
And so that's where I ended up doing my student internship at that Church of Gethsemane in Brooklyn, New York. And that was also transformative. And I'll just say, when I went up there and interviewed for that position, it's mostly a Black and Latino congregation, and the pastor is a Black woman. And so she said to me, Holly, what do you know about the Black and Latino culture? And I remember saying to her, her name was Diane Lacey. I remember saying, Reverend Lacey, I'm a white woman from Maine. I don't know anything about the Black and Latino culture. I said, but I promise that I will try very hard and you will not be disappointed. And I remember she just had a look on her face like, this is who God has sent me.
Well, I'm thinking you must have felt guided by God, because you keep saying, you tried for this, but there was no opening. So I had to go here, was the only thing left. And, moving you into this path, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So I know where the path has led you since you came out of seminary. And I think this might be a good place to say, how has this continued, this work with people, incarcerated folks? What are you doing now with it?
Sure. So one of my greatest joys is that I get to be up at the Maine State Prison in Warren, and I get to support a hospice group of incarcerated men who take care of other incarcerated men at the end of life. And they do this so that no man in prison at the Maine State Prison dies alone, and that every man dies with dignity. And so it's a great honor to be in that place. And also, it's also, once again, I always keep saying this word, but I don't have a better word for it. Once again, that is a transformative experience every time I go up there, because you see, you're working with people, and some of them have done very bad things. Some of them have taken a life. Um, and you just see like the human journey through doing something that was awful, to repentance, and to trying to be a human that gives back to a community. And I just find all of that very profound.
Right. And I just want to sort of underline what you've told us. So this is a federal prison.
It's a state prison, Maine State
Prison. But it's when you go in, a guard accompanies you and unlocks doors. And does a guard have to stay with you when you're in the room?
So somebody has to walk me in, and sometimes it's a guard, but sometimes it's the chaplain. But I don't have any free access. I go through all the locked doors and they all lock behind me. But once I'm in with the room, with the class, sometimes the chaplain will stay, or sometimes I'll be alone.
Right. Yeah. And these are men
mm-hmm.
who are learning from you, or
right.
you accompanying them in the process of helping other men die.
Right. Yeah.
So that's very heavy. That's very heavy. That's very significant work? I mean, when you say you can't think of a name other than transformative, yeah, that's very transformative, right? It's significant. It's not like you're holding somebody's hand in a nice private hospital room or, yeah. So my thought is to ask you is, so what was that like when you started that? Were you frightened? Or did you have this knowing I'm supposed to be here? What was that like?
So when I first went into the women's prison in New York, I was scared. And I was really a little undone by the fact that, like, once you're in there, like, because you don't get to take your cell phone or anything, that you are just inside until somebody else lets you out, right? Um, but once I met the women and had relationships with them, I stopped being scared for my safety. It's not like you couldn't get hurt when you go inside a place like a prison, but the chances of it are low. So when I first went into the Maine State Prison, I had done away with that fear. I wasn't afraid anymore.
Even though these are men, so potentially more dangerous, maybe, or maybe not.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I wasn't afraid. I was invited in by a woman named Candace Powell who had started the hospice program up at the Maine State Prison. And so I didn't just go in like by myself. I didn't start the hospice program myself. Like, so I was there as a guest. And so I got to meet the men in a very safe environment. And I didn't know on that first time when Candace invited me in that I would be coming back. I just enjoyed the visit. I was really impressed by the respect and the caliber of the men who were in the class. And I think I went back several other times with her before I went in independently. So I got to go uh, in the most positive situation ever.
right, right, right. So how do you think that has informed? So then we talk about, well, you did become a pastor, even though you didn't want to and you didn't want to take the class, but you did because I don't know why, because
I don't know why either. Just in case, I said,
I know, but
just in case this is my path.
here's this woman going into prisons, but she doesn't so much want to speak and give a sermon in front of a congregation. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not going to do well with this, but the joke where they say, people would rather die than speak in front of other people.
Right, right,
But
right.
so, um, how did it happen then that you became a pastor? And I have heard your sermons, which I was just complimenting you, that they're fabulous.
Thank you, Susanna.
Really.
I think that's part of, so you talk about like there's like the journey and then there's the journey, right? And it continues in different ways. And when you go back home, um, like the journey, like you're not going to go back home to what it was before, right? So like I knew that I wasn't going to go back home and be a nurse like I was before. Although it did surprise me that I came back home and I was a nurse. I wasn't really, I was like, wait, I just did all this stuff, God. What do you mean? I'm just being a nurse. But I had a lot of limitations on what I was willing to do as a pastor. So I had moved from California to Maine to be near my parents. And I wasn't willing to take a job as a minister that was going to be 5 or 6 hours away from my parents. And so I was really limited. I had limited myself to the mid coast area. And so that was a big obstacle, limiting myself to the mid coast area because there aren't very many pastoral jobs. Like in the hospital, most hospitals have one or two chaplains, most churches have one minister. And I wasn't interested in a church that wasn't United Church of Christ. So then that's getting narrower and narrower and narrower, right? So I actually had a hard time getting ordained because in the United Church of Christ, you can't get ordained unless we call it we say, unless you have a call. And I was like, I do have a call. And they're like, no, we mean a job. And I was like, oh, so I had a really hard time getting ordained and trying to make that work. And as we prayed about it at the neighborhood, and as I prayed about it, and as my ordination committee kept trying, like, well, this way or this way or this way. And once again, the doors were shut, the doors were shut, the doors were shut. The pastor of the neighborhood said, I'm 65. I'd be happy to go part-time and be partly retired and share this position with you. And that opened up doors at the neighborhood, who then accepted me as being, that they would have that they'd share a full-time role with two pastors, and that one would be the pastor they had, and then they accepted that one would be me. But that was the last door that I expected to open up. I mean, because in my mind, that door was just shut. The neighborhood has a full-time pastor, and
Right.
we weren't in a situation where we were going to afford another pastor. So I wasn't even considering that door. And that was just a lovely gift that Bill Bliss created for me and for the neighborhood.
It worked out beautifully, really did. Yeah. So I guess at this point, the question is, so if you look back to who you were before when you were getting that call,
Yeah.
what if you had said no? I mean, how have you changed? And I know it's transformation in many ways, but could you say what's different? What has the journey brought you? What are the gifts?
Right. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a harder question, because nursing is quite a vocation of its own, and it has, similar gifts. Um, but I think for me, one of the gifts were that I was able, so when I went to seminary, it was an obstacle and a gift, right? That I was 49 when I started seminary, and the other students were in their 20s and 30s.
Right. Right.
So they were younger, and so that makes a difference. And most of them had studied, they had an undergraduate degree in religious studies. And my undergraduate degree was in nursing. So I always felt like I was like a little bit behind, like that everybody was faster than me, and they had a little more education than me in the right things. Not that my nursing education was insignificant. So just the lesson of, like, you can do hard things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was like a really important lesson, in that, and that the level of success of doing a hard thing is not getting the best grade. Like, I had to learn that. I'd always been an A student. So, like, to not be the A student because of lots of reasons, but I still completed it, and I did the hard thing, and it was successful. So
Right.
that
Right.
was an important lesson. You can do hard things, and it also changed my measuring tool for what success looked like,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
You don't have to be the best to be wildly successful at doing the hard thing. Um, and I think I've learned a lot about that perseverance
Yeah.
counts, right? Perseverance counts. And then the last thing is that I've really, each decade, I have learned that I have become more open to not knowing what the next thing is.
Mm.
It's a place that I was certainly not in that place when I first heard the call. I was well trained with my family upbringing to plan everything out, to have plan A, to have plan B, to have plan C. Like, that's how you live your life. You make the plan, and then you make the backup plans if the first plan doesn't work. And you don't ever just jump into anything not knowing, because that's the most foolish thing in the world.
Right.
And I'm not 100% comfortable with that, but I'm much more comfortable with that than I was when I first started.
Right. Right. Which, of course, truly answering a call, you're jumping into the unknown.
Yeah.
And so maybe you would just, and I know you could tell it your beautiful way and it would be longer, but a brief when you went with your friend in New York and she said, "Hey, come do this thing." And because it is your story about the trapeze is such a metaphor for jumping into the unknown.
Yeah.
Can you just share it with us?
Sure, sure. So I have a good friend who always, she was the risk taker friend. And she always was the one that was always pushing me to do things outside of my comfort zone. And so this was another one of her things. She's like, I'm going to come to New York City. I'm going to see you. I'm like, grand. And she's like, yeah, and we're going to go to this circus and we're going to swing on the trapeze. And I was like, okay, sure. And we get there and it's a real trapeze. It's like up in the air, like you see at the circus, and it's on a platform. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this is what we were doing. And of course, because she's the risk taker, she climbs up and she does it, and she's like, "Woohoo! It's so fun!" And I, being more intrepid, I climb up and I look around and I'm like, "This doesn't feel fun at all." And the hardest thing about doing the trapeze is that what they want you to do, and it's safe. They have a net and they have a harness on you, so you're not really gonna fall and get hurt. But that's like what you know in your head and what you feel in your heart is not the same because you are way high up.
Right.
And I remember the hardest thing being that you have to stand on the edge of the platform, and then you're supposed to arch your back, and then you're supposed to reach out over your center of balance so that you can grab that trapeze bar. And then literally they say jump. And I had such a hard time of not standing on the edge. That was hard enough, but reaching out over my center of balance was like such a mind game. I think I went up 3 times and only one time that I actually grabbed the trapeze bar without help
Mm.
uh, because it was so hard to do it. But it was fantastically fun. Like, it was fun enough to climb up and try again, right? And afterwards, I remember reflecting on it, thinking like this is just like such a metaphor for what's happening in my life right now. I'm way out of my comfort zone, and I'm afraid I'm going to fall and get hurt. And here I am. I'm going to try to grab the trapeze bar and jump.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's the whole leap thing
yeah,
is, yeah, and then not knowing even once you grab it, where the heck is this going to take me?
yeah.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I will tell everyone that Holly is such an excellent pastor is she's a great storyteller and a great, we just get right into her stories, her sermons when on Sundays, which is in Bath, Maine, little church on Washington Street. If anybody is able to come, I would invite you on behalf of the congregation, behalf of the faith community. So, Holly, I have one final question.
Sure.
Um, there's a lot of things we talked about, the call and leaping and God guiding you but what if there could be just one thing that the people listening could take away with them today? You would want to be sure that they take away this. What would it be?
Right. I would say the one thing would be is the advice that you have in your book, You Are a Heroine. It's really important, or don't discount the importance of being intentional and saying out loud and putting out into the universe what your calling is,
Mhm.
because that's what I did that day in 2002 with that prayer. That was an out loud prayer in my car, talking to God. And somehow when you do that, the mystery makes it happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your prayer was answered.
right.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm holding back other things that I'd like to talk to you about because you have such a rich history and the things that I've learned from you as you've told your stories and helped us in the faith community are are many. But I'm going to, at this point, say if somebody listening, Holly, wants to get a hold of you, just to write you, or how would they do that? And we'll put this in the show notes, but just asking you
Sure. The easiest way would be to reach me at my email, which is pastorhollyreid@gmail.com. And so Holly Reid is HOLLYREID.
Okay,
Thank you, Susan.
wonderful. Yeah, and Holly, thank you so much. I know you have to go to worship team and all kinds of things that you're continuing on in your day. But thank you so much for taking this time to be with us. It was really a meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Susanna. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And I would thank people listening in for joining us today. I know that you got a lot out of it. I'm sure you did. So please join me again and have a great, safe, fulfilling heroine's journey. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast for real life heroines. Your time and presence mean the world to us. If you're hungry for more inspiration and ready to craft your own heroine story, connect with Susanna outside of the show. Visit susannalillard.com to discover her courses and programs designed to empower you on your journey. Until next time, may your days be filled with the courage and strength of a true heroine. Stay inspired.